The gun barrel pressed against Delia Dalton's ribs felt colder than the October wind cutting through Silver Pass. She stood frozen at the back door of the telegraph office, one hand still gripping the day's receipts, the other hovering uselessly at her side. The man behind her smelled of whiskey and old sweat. His voice rasped close to her ear. "You got 30 seconds to walk quiet to the horses, Miss Dalton, or I put a bullet through that pretty spine and take the money anyway." She did not scream. Screaming would bring Sheriff Thornton, and Sheriff Thornton would ask questions she could not afford to answer. Her debt was her own, a bankruptcy shame she had carried for 3 years like a stone in her chest. The man she owed, a land speculator named Voss, who operated out of Cheyenne, had finally sent collection in the form of 2 hired guns. She had known this day would come. She had just hoped for more time. The door behind them exploded inward. Wood splintered. The man holding her spun, dragging her sideways, and she saw Lucian Thornton in the doorway, with his revolver leveled and his face carved from winter granite. He did not say a word. He fired once. The bullet took the man in the shoulder, and he dropped, screaming, his gun clattering across the floorboards. Delia stumbled forward, gasping, and Lucian caught her elbow with his free hand, steadying her without looking away from the wounded man on the floor. His voice came low and flat. "Where is the other one?" Delia's throat locked. She had not expected him to know there were 2. She had not expected him at all. Lucian's grip on her elbow tightened, not rough, but insistent, and he pulled her behind him as the second man appeared in the front doorway. This one was older, meaner, with a scar splitting his left eyebrow. He raised his rifle. Lucian shoved Delia toward the corner and fired twice, fast and clean. The man crumpled. Silence fell like a hammer. Delia pressed her back against the wall, her heart slamming against her ribs, her hands shaking so hard she had to clasp them together. Lucian turned to look at her. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, tired and sharp and too knowing. He holstered his gun and crossed the small room in 3 strides. He stopped a foot away, his voice dropping to something quiet and dangerous. "You owe Voss." It was not a question. Delia's breath hitched. She wanted to lie. She wanted to run. Instead, she lifted her chin and met his gaze, her voice barely steady. "That is none of your concern, Sheriff." Lucian's jaw tightened. "It is now. Voss does not send guns unless the debt is past due and the debtor is running. You planning to run, Miss Dalton?" She hated how he said her name, formal and cold, like she was a stranger. They had lived in the same town for 2 years. She sent his telegrams. He tipped his hat when he passed her on the boardwalk. That was the extent of it. He was the sheriff, steady and silent and impossible to read. She was the telegraph operator who kept her head down and her business private. Now, he was staring at her like she was a problem that needed solving, and she did not know how to make him leave. "I can handle this," she said. Her voice came out thinner than she wanted. "Please, just go." He did not move. His gaze dropped to the receipts still clutched in her fist, then back to her face. "How much?" She swallowed. "That is not your business." "How much?" "Delia." Her name without the miss felt like a hand around her throat. She closed her eyes, just for a second, and the weight of 3 years crushed down on her. She had lost everything when her father's freight company went under. She had borrowed from Voss to keep the family name clear, to bury her father with dignity, to start over in a town where no one knew the Dalton bankruptcy. She had been paying him back in pieces, slow and painful, but last month she had missed a payment. Then another. Voss did not forgive missed payments. $2,000, she whispered. Lucien went very still. Then he turned, walked to the door, and locked it. He pulled the curtain across the window. When he faced her again, his expression had not softened, but something else had entered his eyes. Calculation. Resolve. He pulled off his hat and set it on the desk, then dragged a hand through his hair. I will pay it. Delia stared at him. The words made no sense. She shook her head, stepping forward. No, absolutely not. I will not take charity, especially not from you. It is not charity. His voice stayed level. It is a deal. I pay Voss. You marry me. We keep this town from tearing itself apart over a scandal, and you keep the telegraph office open. You said you wanted to keep it open. This is how. Her breath stopped. She searched his face for mockery, for pity, for anything that would explain why the most private man in Silver Pass had just proposed a marriage bargain in a room still reeking of gunpowder. He looked back at her with no warmth and no apology, just that same hard resolve. Why? She said. Why would you do this? Because Voss will not stop. He will send more men. You will lose the office. The town will lose its only telegraph line. And I will lose the one person in Silver Pass who does not ask me questions I do not want to answer. His mouth twitched. Bitter and brief. Call it mutual convenience. She wanted to argue. She wanted to throw his offer back in his face. But her hands were still shaking, and the bodies on the floor were still warm. And she knew he was right. Voss would not stop. She had nowhere else to go. No family. No savings. No options. And Lucien Thornton, for reasons she could not fathom, was offering her a way out. She lifted her chin. If I agree, this is a business arrangement. Nothing more. You pay the debt, I keep the office running, and we live separate lives under the same roof. No expectations. No intimacy. Do you understand? He nodded once. Understood. She held out her hand, formal and cold, the way you would seal a contract. He looked at her hand for a long moment, then took it. His palm was rough, warm, and steady. The contact sent a shock up her arm that she ignored. Then I agree, she said. Lucien released her hand and stepped back. He pulled a folded telegram from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. This came through an hour ago. Voss sent it to his men. I intercepted it. That is how I knew they were coming. Delia unfolded the paper with numb fingers. The message was short and brutal. Collect Dalton or collect the office. No extensions. She crumpled it and dropped it on the desk, her stomach twisting. How long have you known, she asked, that you owed him? 2 months. That he was coming for collection? Since this morning. He crossed his arms, leaning back against the door. I sent a wire to Cheyenne an hour ago. Told Voss the debt is paid, and Delia Dalton is under my protection. He will not touch you again. She pressed her hands flat on the desk to stop them shaking. You had no right. I had every right. You are about to be my wife. The word wife hit her like a slap. She turned away, staring at the telegraph key, the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted sideways. She had spent 3 years building a careful, quiet life. She had earned respect in Silver Pass by being reliable, invisible, and untouchable. Now she was going to marry the sheriff in a deal that would make her the subject of every piece of gossip, from here to Cheyenne. "When?" she said. "Tomorrow. I already spoke to the circuit preacher. He will be here at noon." She closed her eyes. Of course he had. Lucien Thornton did not make offers he had not already planned to execute. She turned back to face him, her voice sharp. "And what do you get out of this, Sheriff? You said mutual convenience. What do you need?" His expression did not change, but something flickered behind his eyes. A hesitation, a crack in the granite. Then it was gone. "I need a wife who will not ask me to be something I am not," he said quietly. "I need someone who understands that some debts cannot be paid with money. You keep your secrets. I keep mine. And we both get what we need." That is the deal. Delia studied him, trying to read the truth beneath the words. She had always thought of Lucien Thornton as untouchable, a man who wore his authority like armor and never let anyone close. Now she wondered what he was hiding, what debt he carried, what wound had carved that exhaustion into his eyes. But she did not ask. That was the deal. No questions. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow at noon." He nodded, picked up his hat, and unlocked the door. He paused in the doorway, his back to her. One more thing. The engagement scandal. Your former fiancé, Charles Brennan. He is going to make this difficult. Delia's chest tightened. Charles. She had not thought of him in months, had worked hard not to think of him. Their broken engagement had been quiet, brutal, and entirely her fault. She had ended it the day her father died, the day the bankruptcy became public. Charles had wanted to marry her anyway, to shoulder her shame, and she had refused. She had told him she would not let him tie himself to a ruined name. He had not forgiven her. "Let him," she said. "I do not care what Charles Brennan thinks." Lucien glanced back at her, his gaze unreadable. "You will care when he tries to contest the deed to this office. He filed a claim this morning. Says your father owed him money, and the telegraph station is collateral." The floor dropped out from under her. She gripped the edge of the desk, her voice rising. "That is a lie. My father never borrowed from Charles. Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, Charles has a lawyer and a signed promissory note. If he wins, you lose the office, and Voss loses his leverage. Which means Voss will come after you in other ways." Lucien's voice stayed calm, relentless. "That is why we do this tomorrow. Once you are my wife, Charles cannot touch you. The deed stays in your name, protected under marriage law. Voss backs off because I have the backing of the territorial marshal. Everyone wins except the people trying to take from you." Delia stared at him, her mind racing. It was a trap within a trap, and Lucien had just handed her the only way out. She hated that she needed him. She hated that he was right. "Fine," she said. "Tomorrow at noon." He settled his hat low and stepped into the fading daylight. "I will send someone to deal with the bodies. Lock the door behind me." Then he was gone. And Delia was alone with 2 dead men and a future she had never wanted. She locked the door. She sat down at the desk and stared at the telegraph key until her vision blurred. Then she picked up the crumpled telegram and smoothed it out, reading it again. Collect Dalton or collect the office. As if she were a piece of property. As if 3 years of work meant nothing. She folded the paper into precise squares and tucked it into her apron pocket. Then she stood, lit a second lamp, and began drafting the announcement that would run in tomorrow's Silver Pass Ledger. Miss Delia Dalton and Sheriff Lucian Thornton to wed at noon. Courthouse steps, all invited. She kept it short. She kept it clean. She did not mention the 2 dead men, or the deal, or the fact that her hands still shook when she thought about the gun pressed against her ribs. By the time the undertaker arrived with his wagon, she had the office swept, the blood mopped, and her face composed into something that looked like calm. She handed him $20 from the receipts and asked no questions. He asked none in return. That was how Silver Pass worked. You kept your business private, and people left you alone. She walked home through the dark streets, her shawl pulled tight, her breath misting in the cold air. Her room above the dry goods store was small and plain. 1 bed, 1 chair, 1 window that looked out over the livery stable. She had lived there since she arrived in Silver Pass. She had never invited anyone inside. Tomorrow, she would leave it behind and move into the sheriff's house on the edge of town. A place she had never seen. She undressed in the dark and lay down on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep did not come. She kept seeing Lucian's face in the moment he had caught her elbow, the way his hand had been steady when hers shook, the way he had said her name like it mattered. She kept hearing his voice. You keep your secrets, I keep mine. What secrets did a sheriff carry? What debts? She rolled onto her side and closed her eyes, forcing the thoughts away. It did not matter. This was a business arrangement. She would keep the telegraph office. He would keep whatever he was protecting. They would live separate lives under the same roof, and no one would ask questions. That was the deal. Morning came cold and bright. Delia woke before dawn and dressed carefully, choosing her best blouse, a deep ivory with small buttons up the front, and her dark gray skirt. She braided her hair and pinned it tight, then wrapped her faded shawl around her shoulders. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand and saw a woman who looked older than 32, tired and weary and alone. She walked to the telegraph office and opened it as usual, sending the morning dispatches, logging the incoming messages. No one mentioned the wedding. No one mentioned the bodies. Silver Pass had learned not to ask. At 11:30, she locked the office and walked to the courthouse. A small crowd had gathered on the steps, more out of curiosity than celebration. The circuit preacher stood at the top, a thin man with a Bible and a tired smile. Lucian waited beside him, dressed in a clean dark suit, his hat in his hands, his face unreadable. Delia climbed the steps. She stopped in front of him, and for a moment they just looked at each other. His eyes were the same storm gray, tired and guarded. Hers felt the same. She wondered if he was as uncertain as she was, if he regretted the offer, if he wanted to walk away. He held out his hand. She took it. The preacher spoke quickly, his voice carrying over the murmur of the crowd. The words blurred together. Love, honor, cherish, sickness, health, death. Delia barely heard them. She was too aware of Lucian's hand around hers, rough and warm. The same hand that had fired twice, without hesitation, to keep her alive. "Do you take this woman?" "I do." "Do you take this man?" She hesitated, just for a breath. Then she lifted her chin and met his gaze. "I do." The preacher pronounced them married. Lucian did not kiss her. He simply squeezed her hand once, brief and firm, then released it. The crowd clapped, polite and uncertain. Delia turned and walked down the steps, her new husband beside her, and the whole town watching. Charles Brennan stood at the back of the crowd. Delia saw him as she reached the bottom step, his face carved from ice, his eyes locked on hers. He did not move. He did not speak. But the hatred in his gaze was clear enough. Lucian saw him too. He stopped, his hand moving to rest lightly on Delia's lower back, a gesture so small and deliberate it felt like a brand. He looked at Charles and said nothing. He did not need to. The message was clear. She is mine now. Walk away. Charles turned and walked away. Delia let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Lucian's hand dropped from her back, and they walked together down the street toward his house. No one followed. No one called out congratulations. Silver Pass had witnessed a wedding, but it had not witnessed a celebration. The house sat at the edge of town, a small clapboard structure with a covered porch and a single chimney. It looked sturdy, plain, and private. Lucian unlocked the door and stepped aside, letting her enter first. She walked into a front room with a stone fireplace, a worn sofa, a table with 2 chairs. The walls were bare. The floor was clean. It looked like a place where someone lived, but did not stay. "Your room is upstairs," Lucian said. "First door on the left. I am in the second. The kitchen is through there. I am not home most nights." "I will not bother you." She turned to face him, her chest tight. "And if someone asks why we married, we tell them the truth. We are both practical people who saw an advantage." He set his hat on the table and met her eyes. "They will believe it, because it is true." Delia nodded slowly. She wanted to say something else, to ask him again why he had done this, but the words would not come. Instead, she climbed the stairs and opened the first door on the left. The room was small, clean, with a bed, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the empty prairie. She set her shawl on the bed and sat down, her hands folded in her lap. She was married. She was safe. She was alone. She did not know which felt worse. The first week passed in silence. Delia ran the telegraph office. Lucian patrolled the town. They shared the house like 2 strangers boarding in the same hotel, polite and distant. He left before dawn. She returned after dusk. They did not eat together. They did not speak beyond what was necessary. "Good morning. I will be late tonight. The roof needs repair." It was exactly what she had asked for. It felt like suffocation. On the 8th day, a telegram arrived from Cheyenne. Delia read it twice, her hands going cold. She locked the office and walked to the sheriff's station, pushing through the door without knocking. Lucian looked up from his desk, his expression sharpening. "What happened?" She handed him the telegram. He read it in silence, his jaw tightening. Then he set it down and looked at her. "Boss is contesting the payment." He says the debt was personal, not transferable, and he wants his money back, plus interest. He is sending a representative to Silver Pass next week. Delia's throat closed. I thought you said he would back off. I thought he would. Lucian stood, pacing to the window. He is testing me, seeing if I will fold. He leaned against the frame, his back to her. This is about more than money now. This is about reputation. If I let Voss walk into my town and take what is mine, I lose every ounce of authority I have. She flinched at the word mine. She knew he meant the town, the office, the deal. But it sounded like something else, something heavier. What do we do? She asked. We make it real. She stared at him. What? He turned to face her, his expression grim. Right now we look like a business arrangement. That gives Voss room to argue the debt is still yours. If we make this marriage look real, if we convince the town and Voss that this is a genuine union, he has no legal standing. The debt dies with the marriage. He cannot touch you. Delia shook her head, stepping back. No. That was not the deal. The deal was mutual convenience. This is still convenient. It is just a different kind of performance. He crossed his arms. We start appearing together in public. We attend church. We have dinner at the hotel. We act like a married couple who chose each other. It is temporary. Once Voss backs off, we go back to the way things were. She wanted to argue. She wanted to refuse. But she could see the logic, cold and clear. If Voss thought the marriage was fake, he would keep pushing. If he thought it was real, he would have no leverage. How long? She said. A month. Maybe 2. He watched her carefully. I am not asking you to share my bed, Delia. I am asking you to share a dinner table and a church pew. That is all. She closed her eyes, the weight pressing down again. Fine. But after Voss is gone, we go back to separate lives. No expectations. No changes. Agreed. She turned and walked out, her heart pounding. She did not look back. The performance began the next Sunday. They walked to church together, her hand resting lightly on his arm. His stride shortened to match hers. The congregation stared. Whispers followed them down the aisle. They sat in the second pew, close enough that their shoulders touched, far enough that it still felt like distance. Delia kept her eyes forward, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm. Lucian's presence beside her felt like heat and weight, impossible to ignore. After the service, they stood on the church steps and accepted awkward congratulations from the townspeople. Mrs. Coulter, the mayor's wife, grasped Delia's hands and beamed. Such a lovely surprise, dear. We are all so happy for you both. Delia smiled and thanked her, and felt Lucian's hand settle on her lower back again, warm and steady. The gesture was becoming familiar. She hated how much she did not hate it. They walked home in silence. Once inside, Lucian dropped his hand and stepped back, putting space between them. That was good. Keep doing that. She nodded. She went upstairs and closed the door and sat on the bed, staring at the wall. She did not know how to feel. She did not know what she wanted. She only knew that the line between performance and reality was starting to blur, and that terrified her. The next week they had dinner at the hotel. Lucian reserved a corner table, quiet and visible. They ordered roast beef and potatoes, and Delia forced herself to eat while the entire dining room watched. Lucian spoke in low tones about nothing important. The weather, the cattle drive passing through next month. The new school teacher. She answered in kind, keeping her voice steady, her face neutral. It felt like a play. She hated how good he was at it. Halfway through the meal, Charles Brennan walked in. He stopped when he saw them, his face going hard. Then he walked to their table and stood over them, his voice tight. "Enjoying your victory, Sheriff?" Lucian set down his fork and looked up, his expression flat. "I do not know what you mean, Brennan. Do not play games with me. You stole her. You knew I still wanted her, and you took her anyway." Delia's hands clenched in her lap. She started to speak, but Lucian cut her off, his voice quiet and edged. "Miss Dalton made her own choice. If you cannot accept that, that is your problem, not mine." Charles leaned forward, his hands braced on the table. "You think you have won. You think you are safe. But I know what you are hiding, Thornton. And when the truth comes out, she will see what kind of man she really married." Lucian stood slowly, his height and presence forcing Charles back a step. "If you have something to say it. Otherwise, walk away." Charles stared at him, rage and something else, fear maybe, flickering across his face. Then he turned and walked out. The dining room exhaled. Conversations resumed, quieter now, full of speculation. Delia looked up at Lucian, her voice low. What was he talking about? "What are you hiding?" Lucian sat down and picked up his fork, his face unreadable. "Nothing that concerns you. It concerns me if it threatens this arrangement. It does not." He met her eyes, his voice firm. "Leave it alone, Delia." She wanted to push. She wanted to demand the truth. But the deal was no questions, and she had agreed. So, she picked up her own fork and finished her dinner in silence, the weight of his secret pressing between them like a wall. That night, she could not sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Charles's words. "I know what you are hiding, Thornton. What could a sheriff hide that would matter? What could be bad enough to threaten everything?" She got up and walked downstairs. The house was dark except for a faint glow from the front room. She stopped in the doorway. Lucian sat on the sofa, still dressed, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at the cold fireplace. She cleared her throat. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before he shut it down. "Cannot sleep," he said. "No." She crossed the room and sat in the chair across from him, tucking her shawl around her shoulders. "Are you going to tell me what Charles was talking about?" "No." She studied him, the exhaustion carved into his face, the way his shoulders hunched just slightly, as if carrying weight. "You said we keep our secrets. But if your secret is going to destroy this deal, I deserve to know." He took a slow drink, then set the glass on the table. "It will not destroy the deal. It will destroy me. There is a difference." Her chest tightened. "Lucian." He shook his head, his voice low and rough. "I killed a man 5 years ago. Not in the line of duty, not in self-defense. I killed him because he deserved it. And I have spent every day since waiting for someone to find out and take everything I built. That is what Charles knows. That is what he will use if he gets desperate enough." The room went silent. Delia stared at him, her mind racing. She wanted to be shocked. She wanted to be afraid. Instead, all she felt was a strange, hollow recognition. He carried the same weight she did, the same shame, the same fear of being found out. Who was he? She asked quietly. A land speculator. Not Voss. Someone worse. He ruined families for profit. Burned people out of their homes. He came after a widow I knew. She had children. He was going to take everything. So I stopped him. Lucian's jaw tightened. I made it look like an accident. No one questioned it. But Charles was there. He saw me leave the man's camp the night he died. He has been holding it over me ever since. Why have you not left? Why stay in Silver Pass if he knows? Because if I run, he wins. And if he wins, the next sheriff will not care about the people here. They will care about power and money and who can pay them off. Lucian looked at her, his eyes raw. I am not a good man, Delia, but I am the best this town has. So I stay. She stood and crossed to the sofa, sitting beside him. Not close, but closer than they had ever been. She looked at him, this man who had paid her debt, who had married her to keep her safe, who carried his own shame like a scar. I do not think you are a bad man, she said. I think you did what you had to do, just like I did. He turned his head, studying her face. What did you do? She hesitated. Then the words came, slow and painful. My father did not go bankrupt by accident. He made a deal with Voss. He thought he could beat him, thought he was smarter. When he lost, he could not live with the shame. So he put a gun to his head and left me to clean up the mess. She swallowed hard. I buried him with money I did not have. I lied to everyone in this town about how he died. I have been lying ever since. So if you think you are the only one hiding something that could destroy you, you are wrong. Lucian's expression shifted, something breaking open behind the granite. He reached out, slowly, and took her hand. His grip was warm, rough, and steady. I am sorry, he said. She shook her head. Do not be sorry. Just do not lie to me again. If we are going to survive this, we have to trust each other. Even if it is just this. Just the truth. He nodded. All right. No more lies. They sat in silence, hands clasped, the weight between them shifting into something else. Something that felt almost like partnership. After a long moment, Lucian released her hand and stood. You should get some sleep. Voss's man arrives tomorrow. She stood as well, pulling her shawl tight. What is the plan? We meet him together. We show him a united front. And we make it clear that the debt is settled and Silver Pass is not for sale. His voice hardened. If he pushes, I push back. Hard. And if Charles decides to talk, then we deal with that too. One crisis at a time. He looked at her, his eyes steady. You are not alone in this, Delia. Not anymore. She nodded, her throat tight. Neither are you. She went upstairs and lay down, and for the first time since the wedding, she slept. Voss's man arrived on the noon train. His name was Garrett, a thin, sharp-eyed lawyer with expensive clothes and a briefcase full of documents. He walked into the telegraph office like he owned it, his gaze sweeping over Delia with cold assessment. Mrs. Thornton, I am here to discuss your outstanding debt to Mr. Voss. Delia stood behind the counter, her hands steady. The debt was paid in full by my husband. You have no claim here. Garrett smiled, cold and thin. That is a matter of legal interpretation. Mr. Voss believes the debt was personal and non-transferable. He is willing to settle for $3,000, plus accrued interest. Or he will foreclose on this property. The door opened. Lucian walked in, his presence filling the small room. He stopped beside Delia, his hand resting on the counter between them, close enough to her hand that their fingers almost touched. The debt was settled, Lucian said. I have the receipt signed by Voss himself. If he wants to contest it, he can take it to a territorial judge. But he will not win, and he knows it. Garrett's smile did not waver. Sheriff Thornton. How convenient that you married Miss Dalton so quickly after her. Shall we say, difficulties became known. One might wonder if this marriage is legitimate, or simply a legal maneuver to avoid repayment. Delia's chest tightened. Lucian's hand shifted, covering hers on the counter. The contact was warm, deliberate, unmistakable. My marriage is none of your concern, Lucian said quietly. But since you seem interested, I can assure you it is entirely legitimate. My wife and I are very happy. Aren't not we, Delia? She looked up at him, meeting his steady gaze. Yes, very happy. Garrett's smile thinned. I see. Well, Mr. Voss will be disappointed. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folded document. However, there is the matter of the contested deed. Mr. Charles Brennan has filed a claim asserting that your father owed him money, and this property is collateral. If that claim is validated, the office reverts to Mr. Brennan, and your debt to Mr. Voss becomes enforceable once more. Delia's hand tightened under Lucian's. That claim is fraudulent. My father never borrowed from Charles. Perhaps. But proving that will require a legal process, which takes time. And money. Garrett set the document on the counter. Mr. Voss is a patient man. He can wait. Lucian's voice went flat. Tell Voss that if he sets foot in Silver Pass, I will arrest him for attempted extortion. Tell him that if he sends anyone else to harass my wife, I will make his life very difficult. And tell him that the next time he wants to play games, he should pick a town that does not have a federal marshal on speed dial. Do you understand? Garrett's smile finally cracked. He picked up his briefcase and stepped back. I will relay your message, Sheriff. Good day. He walked out. The door closed. Silence fell. Delia exhaled slowly, her hand still under Lucian's. He did not move it. She did not pull away. Do you really have a federal marshal on speed dial? She asked. No. But Garrett does not know that. Lucian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. And Voss will not risk calling my bluff. He is a businessman. He knows when to cut his losses. And Charles is desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Lucian finally lifted his hand, stepping back. We wait. We watch. And we stay visible. If the town believes we are a real marriage, Charles has no leverage. She nodded slowly. How long do we keep this up? Until Voss and Charles both back off. Or until one of them breaks. He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. Can you do that? Keep playing the part. She met his gaze, her voice steady. Can you? Yes. Then so can I. The performance intensified. They walked through town together every evening. They attended church every Sunday. They ate dinner at the hotel twice a week. They smiled. They touched. They acted like a couple who had chosen each other, who trusted each other, who cared. And somewhere in the middle of the performance, it stopped feeling like acting. Delia noticed it first. The way Lucian's hand on her back felt less like a gesture and more like comfort. The way he waited for her after church, even when he did not need to. The way he brought her coffee in the morning, strong and black. The way she liked it, without asking. She noticed the way she stopped flinching when he touched her. The way she found herself looking for him when she crossed the street. The way her breath caught when he smiled, rare and brief, like sunlight breaking through clouds. It terrified her. One night, 2 weeks after Garrett's visit, they sat on the porch together, the sky dark and full of stars. Delia wrapped her shawl tight against the cold, her voice quiet. Do you ever regret this? The deal. Lucian leaned back in his chair, his gaze on the horizon. No. Do you? She hesitated. Then she shook her head. No. I did not expect it to feel like this. Like what? Like something real. He turned his head, looking at her. The lamplight from inside caught his face, softening the hard lines, and for a moment she saw the man beneath the armor. Tired. Alone. Carrying too much. Maybe it is real, he said quietly. Maybe it has been real since the beginning, and we just did not want to admit it. Her chest tightened. Lucian, I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to let someone in. I have spent 3 years keeping everyone out. I do not know how to stop. Then do not stop. His voice was rough, gentle. Just let me stay close. That is all I am asking. Let me stay close, and we will figure out the rest. She looked at him. This man who had saved her, who had married her, who had trusted her with his darkest secret. And she realized that somewhere along the way, she had stopped seeing him as the sheriff, the deal, the performance. She saw him as Lucian. Just Lucian. And that mattered more than she wanted it to. All right, she whispered. He reached out and took her hand. She let him. They sat in silence, hands clasped, and for the first time in 3 years, Delia felt like she might deserve peace. The next morning, everything fell apart. Delia was working in the telegraph office when Charles Brennan walked in with 2 men she did not recognize. One was a lawyer, the other was a federal land agent. Charles's face was tight with triumph. Miss Dalton, or should I say, Mrs. Thornton. The lawyer stepped forward, holding a document. I represent Mr. Charles Brennan in the matter of the contested deed to this property. We have evidence that your father signed a promissory note to Mr. Brennan 6 months before his death, naming this telegraph office as collateral. The note was never repaid. Therefore, under territorial law, the property reverts to Mr. Brennan, effective immediately. Delia's hands went cold. That is a lie. My father never signed anything. The lawyer handed her the document. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. The signature looked like her father's. The date matched. But she knew. It was a forgery. Charles stepped forward, his voice low and vicious. You should have stayed with me, Delia. You should have let me help you. Instead, you ran to him, and now you are going to lose everything. Again, the door slammed open. Lucian strode in, his face carved from stone, his gaze locked on Charles. His hand rested on his gun. Get out. Charles smiled. I do not think so, Sheriff. This is a legal matter now. You have no authority here. The land agent cleared his throat. Sheriff Thornton, I understand this is difficult, but the documentation appears to be in order. Unless you can provide evidence to the contrary, I am required to transfer the deed to Mr. Brennan. Lucian's jaw tightened. He looked at Delia, and she saw the helplessness in his eyes. He had saved her once. He could not save her now. She felt the floor drop out from under her. She was going to lose the office. She was going to lose everything. And there was nothing either of them could do. Then the door opened again, and a tall man in a long coat walked in. He had a badge pinned to his chest. Federal Marshal. He looked at the land agent, his voice flat. I need to see that promissory note. The agent handed it over. The marshal studied it for a long moment, then looked at Charles. This is a forgery. Charles's face went white. That is not true. Yes, it is. I have seen your handwriting, Brennan. You are not very good at copying other people's signatures. The marshal handed the document back to the agent. This note is fraudulent. Mr. Brennan is under arrest for attempted fraud and extortion. The deed remains with Mrs. Thornton. Charles lunged forward, his face twisting. You cannot do this. I have rights. I have. He stopped, his gaze swinging to Lucian. You set this up. You brought him here. Lucian's expression did not change. I sent a telegram last week. I asked the marshal to look into your finances. Turns out you have been forging documents for years. Land deeds. Promissory notes. Bank drafts. You are going to prison, Charles. And you are never coming back. The marshal stepped forward and clamped irons on Charles's wrists. Charles struggled, shouting, but the marshal dragged him out. The lawyer and land agent followed, silent and pale. The door closed. Silence fell. Delia stared at Lucian, her chest heaving. You knew he was going to try this. I suspected. I could not prove it until the marshal finished his investigation. Lucian crossed to her, his voice low. I am sorry I did not tell you. I did not want to give you hope until I was sure. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to yell at him for keeping secrets again. But all she felt was relief, overwhelming and dizzying. She pressed her hands to her face and let out a shaky breath. Lucian's hand touched her shoulder, tentative and warm. Delia. She looked up at him, tears blurring her vision. Thank you. I do not know what else to say. Just thank you. He pulled her into his arms, slow and careful, giving her time to pull away. She did not. She pressed her face against his chest and let herself shake, let herself cry, let herself feel safe for the first time in 3 years. His arms tightened around her, his voice rough. You do not have to thank me. You are my wife. I protect what is mine. The words should have felt possessive, Instead, they felt like a promise. She pulled back, wiping her eyes, her voice unsteady. I thought this was just a deal. I thought we were just playing a part. Maybe we were. His hand came up, cupping her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. But I am done pretending. I meant what I said on the porch. This is real. You are real, and I am not letting you go. Her breath caught. She searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. She found none, just the same exhaustion, the same resolve, and something new. Something that looked like hope. I do not know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I. But we will figure it out. Together. He leaned his forehead against hers, his voice dropping to a murmur. If you want to. If you do not, I will keep the deal. Separate lives, no expectations. But I am asking, Delia. I am asking if you want something more. She closed her eyes, feeling his breath against her skin, his warmth surrounding her. She thought about the last 3 weeks. The performance that had become real. The trust that had grown between them. The way he had saved her. Not just once, but over and over. Yes, she said. I want something more. He kissed her. It was slow, careful, and real. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, she was breathless, and his eyes were dark. Come home, he said. Not to the house. Home. With me. She nodded. Yes. They walked home together through the bright afternoon, her hand in his, the whole town watching. Let them watch. Let them talk. She did not care anymore. She had spent 3 years hiding. She was done hiding. That night, they sat on the porch again. Closer this time, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. The stars were bright and cold, and the prairie stretched out forever. And for the first time in a long time, the silence felt like peace. What happens now? She asked. Now we live. We run the telegraph office. I keep the town safe. We figure out how to be married for real. He glanced down at her, his mouth twitching, and we stop letting other people tell us what we deserve. She smiled. That sounds good. They sat in silence, the night wrapping around them, and Delia felt something she had not felt since her father died. She felt like she belonged somewhere, like she had a future, like she was not alone. 3 days later, a telegram arrived from Cheyenne. Delia read it, then walked to the sheriff's station and handed it to Lucian. He read it in silence, then looked up, his expression unreadable. Voss is withdrawing his claim. He says the debt is settled, and he has no further interest in Silver Pass. Lucian set the telegram down. It is over. You are free. She nodded slowly. We are free. He stood and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. She went willingly, wrapping her arms around his waist, pressing her face against his chest. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other, letting the weight finally lift. I love you, he said quietly. I do not know when it happened, but it did, and I am not taking it back. Her chest tightened, but this time it was not fear. It was something else, something warm and terrifying and real. I love you too, she whispered. I did not think I could. But I do. He pulled back just enough to kiss her, deep and slow, and she felt the last of her walls crumble. She was done running, done hiding, done carrying the weight alone. 2 weeks later, the circuit preacher returned to Silver Pass. Lucien and Delia met him on the courthouse steps, and this time, they did not need a deal. They renewed their vows in front of the whole town, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because the marriage that had started as a bargain had become something neither of them could live without. When the preacher pronounced them married, again, for real this time, Lucien kissed her in front of everyone. The crowd cheered. Delia laughed, her arms around his neck, her heart full. They walked home hand in hand, and this time, there was no performance, no pretense. Just two people who had found each other in the middle of danger and shame and learned to trust, learned to love. That night, she did not go upstairs to her own room. She went to his. He pulled her close, and they lay together in the dark, her head on his chest, his hand tracing slow circles on her back. "I never thought I would deserve this," she said quietly. "Peace, love, a future. You deserve all of it." His voice was rough, quiet. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you believe it." She smiled, pressing a kiss to his chest. "I am going to hold you to that." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the weight finally gone, the future stretching out bright and open. They had fought for it. They had earned it. And they were not letting go. The months that followed were not perfect. They argued. They stumbled. They learned each other's wounds and triggers and how to speak without breaking. But they did it together, and that made all the difference. Delia kept the telegraph office running. Lucien kept the town safe. They built a life that was quiet and steady, and theirs. No more secrets. No more shame. Just two people who had been broken and found a way to heal. One evening, 6 months after the wedding, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Delia leaned against Lucien, his arm around her shoulders, her hand resting on his knee. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Paying my debt? Marrying me? All of it?" He looked down at her, his eyes warm. "Not for a second." "You?" She shook her head. "No. I would do it all over again. Every hard part. Every terrifying moment. Because it brought me here. To you." "To you." He kissed the top of her head, his voice rough with emotion. "Good. Because I am not letting you go. Not ever." She smiled, closing her eyes, feeling the warmth of the setting sun and the man beside her. She had spent 3 years believing she did not deserve peace. She had been wrong. Peace was not something you earned. It was something you chose. Something you fought for. Something you built with someone who saw you at your worst and loved you anyway. And she had found that, with the sheriff who had bought her secret at gunpoint and turned it into something real. The sun set. The stars came out. They stayed on the porch, wrapped in each other, and let the night settle around them. They had survived. They had chosen each other. And they were finally, truly home.